Stop her. What is she doing? My bride screams. Her voice sounds far away. I'm lying on the grass at my billion-dollar wedding. My legs don't work anymore. I can't breathe. My body shakes and burns. Then a shadow covers me. It's not a doctor. It's one of the catering staff, a black maid, holding electric clippers. She doesn't wait. She pushes my bride aside, grabs my hair, and shaves it. My guards think she's attacking. My guests think she's crazy. But she's the only one who knows what's really happening, and the only one who might save me. The sun felt like a spotlight, paid for just like everything else today. This was my estate in the Hamptons. My big day. Every part of it was designed to show my power. The flowers, white orchids flown in from Madagascar, hung from huge arches, their smell mixed with the ocean breeze from the cliffs. A string quartet played Vivaldi's Spring Badly, but no one cared. Everything was perfect. Everything was bought. Do you, Liam, take Isabel to be your lawfully wedded wife? The officiant, a retired judge I'd once helped out of a jam, droned. I looked at Isabel. Her veil was a wisp of spun diamond dust. Her beauty was a weapon, and I had just bought the patent. She was the final piece of the collection. Her family's blue blood name for for everything else. A perfect transaction. I already had the penthouse, the jet, the island, and the company Sterling Innovations that bled the world dry and called it progress. Now I had the legacy, the wife. I said, my voice resonating with the arrogance of a man who had never faced a real consequence. It was the same voice I used to gut a competitor, to fire 1,000 people, to order $1.30 Ginny. And do you, Isabel? I tuned her out, my gaze drifting over the crowd. 300 of the world's most powerful people, all here on my lawn, drinking my vintage champagne, all to witness my success. I saw them not as friends or family. I had none, really, but as a living ledger. Senator Harris, whose last campaign I'd funded, Maria Petrova, the banking tycoon I'd nearly bankrupted last quarter, her presence was a sign of her surrender. And there, near the back, looking like a man forced to applaud his own funeral, was my chief rival, Gavin Russo. His face was a mask of polite envy, his eyes betraying the rage of a lesser predator. I gave him a small, tight smile. Let him watch. Let them all watch. To love and to cherish, until death do you part? I do, Isabel whispered, her voice trembling with what I assumed was adoration. Or perhaps she was just thinking of the trust fund that activated upon that very phrase. It didn't matter. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're listening, hooked, and already enjoying the story, please hit subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing our community around the world. Tomorrow, I'm dropping another sweet story, so don't miss it. And the first 4 people to comment with their real names will be featured in our next story. Now, let's continue. Then, by the power vested in me, the officiant smiled, you may kiss the bride. This was it, the moment, the crescendo of the symphony I had composed. I lifted Isabel's veil. Her blue eyes were wide, her lips parted, the perfect porcelain doll. I leaned in, and then pain. It was not a gradual thing. It was a detonation. It wasn't a bee, not a wasp. It was something focused, a biological nail, a single, blinding point of white fire at the crown of my head. I recoiled, a gasp punching out of my chest. Liam? Isabel frowned, her perfect moment ruined. The annoyance in her voice was sharp, audible. Before I could answer, a second pulse, far more insidious, flooded my system. It wasn't hot. It was cold, an icy, chemical tide that raced down my spine and into my limbs. My vision fractured. The impossible green of the lawn turned a sickening, pixelated yellow. The faces of my guests blurred into grotesque, screaming masks. The Vivaldi from the quartet suddenly slowed, the notes bending and stretching, wah-wah, wah-wah, as if the world itself was melting. A metallic, coppery taste filled my mouth. I tried to speak, to say help. The word dissolved. My tongue was a lead weight. Liam, Isabel's voice was louder now, tinged with the first flicker of genuine panic. I clutched my scalp, my fingers tangling in my meticulously styled hair, and I felt it. A tiny hard thing, an insect, pulsing with a venom that felt ancient and lethal. Gah! I screamed, a strangled, ugly sound. My legs, they were just gone. They weren't numb, they simply ceased to exist. I wasn't falling, the ground was rising up to slam me. I crashed forward, my body hitting the antique Persian runner with a heavy, final thud. The smell of fertilized grass and crushed orchids filled my nostrils. The chaos was immediate, a symphony of shrieks. But Isabel's was the loudest. It was a piercing theatrical sound, a wail of performative horror that was more about the ruined aesthetic than my actual well-being. Somebody help him. Oh my God, my wedding. He's ruined my wedding. My security team, led by Ben, my stoic head of detail, rushed forward. Sir, Mr. Sterling, code red. He was at my side, his hand on my neck, checking for a pulse. Is it cardiac? Get a medic. He's having a heart attack, someone shouted. He's been poisoned. Gavin Russo yelled, his voice carrying an unseemly amount of excitement. I was on my back, staring at the perfect blue sky, my body beginning to jerk in tiny, uncontrollable spasms. I was a puppet whose strings were being cut, one by one. I was dying, here on the grass, in front of everyone. The irony was almost amusing. Liam Sterling, killed by a bug. I saw a dozen phones, a forest of glowing rectangles, all pointed at me. They were filming, documenting my end. Then, the sea of bespoke suits and silk dresses parted. Not like the Red Sea. Like curdled milk. A woman. She wasn't a guest. She was a staff. A black and white uniform, a simple bun, dark, intense eyes that held not panic, but a terrifying cold focus. She shoved past Senator Harris, who stumbled back into a floral arrangement. Ma'am, step back. Ben ordered, his hand moving to his sidearm. He was paid to neutralize threats, and this woman, this nobody, was moving with intention. She ignored him. She knelt beside me, her gaze fixed on my head. Her name tag read Linda. Her hands, surprisingly steady, began to probe my scalp. Her touch was not gentle. It was diagnostic. It was rough. I flinched, a low gurgle escaping my throat. Stop her. Isabel shrieked from a safe distance. She's hurting him. She's dirty. Get her away from him. Linda looked up, her eyes locking with Ben's. In that instant, the deferential maid was gone, replaced by a field general. He's been stung. She snapped, her voice low and clear. Paraponera clavata. A bullet ant. They must have been in the orchids from Madagascar. Get an ambulance. She didn't stop there. She grabbed Ben's lapel. You tell them exactly that. Paraponera sting. They'll need neurotoxic antivenom. He has 3, maybe 4 minutes. The venom is paralyzing his diaphragm. Go. Ben froze. The specificity of her words, Paraponera clavata, cut through his training. How did she? No time. Linda yelled, and she stood and sprinted, not toward a phone, not toward the crowd. She sprinted toward the mansion, toward the side entrance where my grooming team had set up a prep room. Where's she going? She's crazy. She's running away. But she returned less than 30 seconds later. My vision was a dimming, chaotic pinprick of light. The world was a black tunnel. But I saw what she was holding. I saw the silver gleam. My electric clippers. What? No. I gurgled, a fresh wave of terror cutting through the paralysis. It was the last vanity of a dying man. Hold him down, Linda commanded Ben. Stop her. Isabel screamed, finally lunging. She's insane. She's going to assault him. She's going to mutilate him. Ben, stop her. Ben, to his credit, was paid to make impossible choices. He looked at my face, now a sickly blue. He looked at my chest, which was barely moving. He looked at Linda's eyes, burning with a terrible certainty. He made his choice. He grabbed my shoulders, pinning me to the grass as my body arched in another seizure. Do it, he growled. Linda flicked the switch. The high-pitched bzzzt of the clippers cut through the screams of the guests. It was the only sound in the universe. She grabbed a fistful of my expensive, dark, product-filled hair and pressed the clippers to my scalp. I felt a raw, pulling, vibrating sensation as the first swath of hair was shorn away, falling onto the white lapel of my tuxedo jacket. The crowd gasped as one. People were filming, closer now, capturing the bizarre, grotesque spectacle. The billionaire groom, spasming on the lawn, being scalped by a maid. "I can't see it," Linda said, her voice tight with concentration. Bzzzzzt. Another section of hair fell away. Bzzzzzt. She was fast, brutal, and efficient. She wasn't styling, she was excavating. The venoms causing swelling. "There," she cried. The paralysis was almost complete. I could only move my eyes. She dropped the clippers. The sting site, now visible on my shaved scalp, was a horrifying purple-black mound, the size of a quarter. She stared at it for a second, then at the single half-inch-long reddish-black ant crawling sluggishly from hair clippings on my chest. With a sudden, vicious move, she snatched the ant and crushed it between her thumb and forefinger. A predator's move. Then her hands were back on my head. "This will hurt," she warned. She didn't have a medical kit. She had her fingernails. She dug them into the swollen flesh, squeezing the sting site with a force that sent a white-hot, agonizing signal through the fog. I roared a sound from an animal, a sound I didn't know I could make. "Get out! Get it out!" She chanted more to herself than to me. She squeezed and I felt a wet pop. She scraped something away. The stinger, I realized. She wasn't done. She looked around wildly, her eyes landing on a shattered flute of champagne on the grass. Without hesitation, she dipped her fingers into the mud of the nearby orchid planter, mixing a crude, brown paste in her palm. Then, she added a splash of the spilled champagne. "What is that? Oh, God, she's poisoning him," Isabel wailed. Linda ignored her. She slapped the muddy, alcoholic poultice directly onto the open wound on my scalp. The sting of the alcohol, the grit of the mud, the primal shock of it all, it was the last thing I felt. The blackness, which had been a tunnel, finally won. The world went from a dim, chaotic pinprick of light to absolute, silent black. The sirens, I could just barely hear, were a distant, fading song. My last conscious thought wasn't of my bride, or my company, or my life. It was a single, baffling, terrifying question. Who is she? The first sound was a beep. It was a sterile, rhythmic, insistent beep that clawed its way through the black chemical fog. The first smell was antiseptic, a sharp, clean, unnatural lemon scent that scraped my nostrils raw. The first sensation was the unnatural, frictionless whisper of thousand-thread-count sheets against my skin. I was alive, and for the first time in my life, I hadn't planned for it. I opened my eyes. The hospital room was the size of a New York apartment, a private suite at Mount Sinai with a wall of glass overlooking Central Park. The late afternoon sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the sterile air. Isabel was in a chair by the window. She was wearing a silk dressing gown, a fresh one, meaning she'd gone home, showered, and changed before returning. She was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, but I noted with a cold, clear detachment that her makeup was flawless. Not a single mascara streak. "Liam," she breathed, her voice a practiced, airy whisper. She rushed over, a cloud of expensive perfume. "You're awake." "Oh, darling, it was horrible." She clutched my hand. Her skin was cold, her rings hard. Our entire day, our wedding ruined. Just ruined. All those people. I pulled my hand away. My head was pounding, a deep, colossal ache that felt like a construction site. My scalp itched. I raised a heavy hand to it, my fingers meeting not my familiar thick hair, but a rough, stubbly bandage that covered my entire head. It all came flooding back. The kiss, the fire, the collapse, the crowd, the clippers, the woman, I rasped. My throat felt like it was full of gravel. That Maid. Isabel's face tightened, the performance of the grieving wife evaporating instantly, replaced by her true form, the annoyed socialite. She's a hero, apparently. It's all over the news. Catering Angel saves Billionaire. It's ridiculous. She mutilated you, Liam. Your hair. Right there on the lawn, in front of everyone. It was barbaric. She saved me. A new voice said. Dr. Harrison, my personal physician, entered the room, reviewing a tablet. He was a man who cost 6 figures a year just to be on call, and his face was uncharacteristically grim. Frankly, Mr. Sterling, you shouldn't be here. He clicked his pen. The venom was from a Paraponera clavata, a bullet ant, as in the sting feels like being shot. I've only read about them in medical journals. They're not native to this continent. Someone will have to answer for how it got into your wedding flowers. Just get to the point, Harrison, I growled. The point, Harrison said, his eyes narrowing, is that the venom is a potent neurotoxin. The EMTs who brought you in, they're the ones who told me. By the time they arrived, you were in full respiratory paralysis. Anaphylaxis was shutting down your organs. You were 2, maybe 3 minutes from complete respiratory failure, from death. The poultice, I managed remembering the mud and champagne. Crude, disgusting, unhygienic, Harrison said with a shrug. But she did 2 things right that no civilian should know how to do. 1, she got the stinger out. It was barbed and still pumping venom directly into your scalp. 2, the mud and alcohol, it acted as a basic astringent and counterirritant. It helped slow the localized absorption, just enough to buy you those 2 minutes. He looked at me, not as a client, but as a specimen. Whoever she is, she knew exactly what she was looking at. She identified the ant. She knew the toxicity. She knew the field treatment. You're not just a lucky man, Mr. Sterling. You're a statistical impossibility. Lucky? Isabel scoffed under her breath. Our wedding video is all over the internet. It looks like a snuff film. Gavin Russo has already called twice, pretending to be concerned. I ignored her. A cold feeling, separate from the venom, was creeping over me. A random catering employee doesn't recognize a rare, exotic ant. A random Maid doesn't know the field expedient treatment for its sting. It wasn't luck. It wasn't a coincidence. It was knowledge. And knowledge, in my world, was never free. Ben, I said, my voice growing stronger. Ben, my security head, stepped in from the hallway where he'd been waiting. He was a silent, imposing man who had been with me for a decade. His face was a mask of professional calm, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. He had failed. A threat had gotten through. Find her, I ordered. The maid, the one on the news. Linda, I want her name. I want her history. I want her credit score. I want to know what she had for breakfast. I want to know everything. Sir, Ben hesitated. We already have her. She's been detained for questioning. Standard procedure. She was vetted by the catering company, but I don't care. I snapped, the old, familiar power surging back, pushing aside the weakness. Find out who she is. I want to see her. Now. Liam, Isabel protested, standing up. You need a rest. We need to call PR. We need to issue a statement. We need to control this narrative. They're saying, Get out, Isabel, I said, not looking at her. What? Her voice was a sharp, offended gasp. Get out. I turned my head on the pillow. The movement sent a fresh spike of pain through my skull. And call my lawyers. My divorce lawyers. I want our arrangement reassessed. You're a liability. She stared, her blue eyes turning to chips of ice. The mask was completely gone. You bastard. I'm a bastard who just got stung by a bullet ant. I said, your concern is overwhelming. Send Ben back in when you're gone. She didn't storm out. She composed herself. She picked up her Chanel bag, smoothed her silk robe, and walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the handle. She saved your life, Liam. And you're still the same monster. I hope she knows what she saved. The door clicked shut. I was left with the beeping monitor and 1,000 questions. It wasn't gratitude I was feeling. It was an imbalance, a cosmic error. My life had been saved by a complete unknown, a variable I hadn't accounted for. It was a debt, and I hated being in debt. Ben returned 4 hours later. The bandage was off. I'd showered, with a nurse's help. I'd seen the damage in the mirror. My head was a butchered, uneven mess of stubble and a single nasty-looking, sutured wound on the crown. I looked like a failed punk rocker, a convict. I looked weak. Ben stood at the foot of my bed, holding a tablet. He looked pale, which was unusual for him. "You found her," I stated. "We did, sir. Linda. She's been working for the catering company for 6 months. No criminal record. Standard background check. Lives in a small apartment in Queens. Has one son, 10 years old." But I knew there was a but. Ben didn't get pale for standard background checks. "Her full name, sir." He swiped on the tablet. "It's Linda. Linda Cole." The name hit me like a physical blow. The room seemed to get colder. "Cole," I repeated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," Ben said, his voice low. "She is the widow of Elias Cole." Elias Cole. The name echoed in my mind, pulling a memory I had intentionally, ruthlessly, and successfully buried for 8 years. Elias Cole, the brilliant, naive engineer, the wide-eyed founder of Green Core, the man who had invented a revolutionary, cheap green energy patent. A patent that would have bankrupted Sterling Innovations' entire energy division. I remembered the boardroom. I remembered the smug, hopeful look on his face as he turned down my first insulting buyout offer. I remembered the cold, precise instructions I'd give my legal team. Bury him. Injunctions. Patent trolls. Accuse him of stealing our tech. Drown him in paperwork. Bleed him dry. And it worked. Flawlessly. Greencore folded in less than a year. Elias Cole, ruined, blacklisted, and drowning in legal debt, lost his company, his house, and 6 months later his life. The papers had called it a suicide. He'd driven his car off the Tappan Zee Bridge. I'd called it a necessary cost of business. He was weak, I was strong. That was the law of the jungle. And his widow had just worked my wedding. His widow had just saved my life. A strange, unfamiliar sensation prickled my skin. It wasn't gratitude. It was something heavier. It felt like irony. A cosmic, structural imbalance. The universe had played a sick joke, and I was the punchline. I couldn't be indebted to her. I couldn't let her have that power over me. "Where is she?" I demanded. "She's in the waiting area, sir. She's been cleared by police. She's asking to see you." "Send her in," I said. "And Ben, we're going to fix this. I'm going to fix this." My mind was already working. I would be magnanimous. I would wipe the slate clean. I would use my power not to crush, but to redeem. It was, in its own way, the ultimate display of my power. I would save her, just as she had saved me. I would restore the balance. The door opened. Linda Cole stood there. She was out of the uniform, wearing a simple pair of jeans and a faded gray blouse. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a simple bun, but her eyes were the same. Intense, focused, and utterly, unervingly devoid of fear. She wasn't looking at a billionaire. She wasn't looking at a monster. She was just looking. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice even. "Linda," I said, trying out the name. I gestured to the expensive leather chair by my bed. She didn't take it. She stood, as if in judgment, her hands clasped in front of her. "You saved my life." "So I'm told," she replied. The bullet ant. "How did you know?" A shadow passed over her face, the first flicker of emotion I'd seen. It was a deep, dark, old pain. My late husband, Elias. He was an engineer, but he was also an amateur entomologist. He was studying them. Their properties, he found their venom fascinating. She paused. "I've read all his research. I know what they can do." Of course. The irony deepened and became a knife. The one thing I hadn't taken from him, his hobby, was what had just saved me. "You saved my life," I repeated, "and you are the widow of Elias Cole. A man my company had a dispute with." A dispute? Her voice was quiet, but it vibrated with a low, dangerous frequency that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "You call the complete and total annihilation of a man's life a dispute?" I was not aware of the personal ramifications. I lied, the words tasting like ash. "You weren't aware that he drove his car off the Tappan Zee Bridge?" she said, her voice never rising, which made it all the more terrifying. You weren't aware that he left behind a wife and a 7-year-old son? You weren't aware that I've spent the last 8 years cleaning houses, serving drinks, and working 3 jobs just to keep my son in a decent school, just to keep a roof over our heads? You were unaware? I had no answer for that. The air crackled. She had me. She knew it. So, I did what I always do. I reached for my checkbook. Or, in this case, I reached for the tablet on my nightstand and brought up my private banking app. I am going to give you $10 million, I announced as if granting a boon. A token of my immense gratitude. It will be in your account by morning. You and your son, you'll be set for life. I looked up, waiting for the tears, the thanks, the release. I expected her to collapse in gratitude. The weight of her life finally lifted. Linda Cole just stared at me. She didn't blink. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was cold. It was sharp. It was the most terrifying smile I had ever seen in my life. $10 million, she repeated softly, as if tasting the words. Is that what your life is worth, Mr. Sterling? I was speechless. I don't want your money, she said, stepping closer to the bed. I could smell the faint, clean scent of soap on her. I don't want your charity. You can't buy this. You can't settle the account and sleep well tonight. What? What do you want then? I was completely off balance. I'd never met someone I couldn't buy, intimidate, or destroy. Her smile faded, replaced by that cold, intense focus from the wedding. I want a job. This was not the response I expected. A job? You wanted to work for me? At Sterling Innovations? After everything? Yes, she said. I want to work for you. At Sterling Innovations. Doing what? I was baffled. You're a caterer. I have a business degree, she said, her voice like ice. From Cornell. One I got before my husband was murdered by your lawyers, and I had to drop out of my MBA program. I want a job. Why? I demanded. Why would you want to walk into that building every day? I want to see, she whispered, her eyes burning into mine. I want to see the man who destroyed my family, the man who built an empire on the bones of good people, like Elias. I want to see how he sleeps at night. I want to see how it all works. It was a preposterous, insane, suicidal request. My legal team would have me committed, and yet I was intrigued. Her audacity was magnetic. She wasn't broken. She wasn't crying. She was fighting. And she had, after all, saved me. Perhaps this was better. This was the ultimate solution. I wouldn't just give her money, I would give her life. I would bring her into my world. I would own her redemption. Keep your friends close, my father used to say, and your enemies on the payroll. Done, I said, a slow smile spreading across my own face. This, I understood. This was a game. We'll create a new department. Vice President of Philanthropic Outreach. A 6-figure salary. An office on the 50th floor. You start Monday. I expected her to be stunned, to be grateful. Instead, she just nodded, as if she'd known I would say yes all along. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice devoid of any emotion at all. You won't regret this. As she turned and walked out of my hospital room, I leaned back against the pillows, a strange sense of satisfaction settling over me. The debt was paid. The imbalance was corrected. I had neutralized the threat. I had turned a ghost from my past into an employee. I had once again won. I was completely, utterly, and fatally wrong. 3 months passed. The wedding was a distant, humiliating memory, a viral video I'd paid millions to have scrubbed from the internet to no avail. My shaved head had grown back, though I now kept it trimmed, military short, a brutal, constant reminder of my vulnerability. The divorce from Isabel was proceeding as expected, which is to say, it was a financial war. My lawyers were sharks, but hers were piranhas. She was, as predicted, not going quietly. But all of that was just noise. The signal was Linda Cole. My obsession with her was immediate and total, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't a desire. It was curiosity. The kind a scientist has for a microbe that can survive in volcanic acid. She was an anomaly. She was the one person in my entire life who had seen me at my absolute weakest, a spasming, dying animal on the grass, and hadn't flinched. I had given her the title VP of Philanthropic Outreach, a bullshit position I'd invented on the spot. I'd given her a corner office on the 50th floor with a view of the Statue of Liberty. I'd expected her to decorate it with plants, attend a few charity galas, and be a silent, grateful symbol of my magnanimity. Instead, she worked. Her office remained bare, save for the desk, the computer, and a single small, framed photo of her son. She arrived at 7 a.m. and left at 9 p.m. She didn't attend galas. She didn't do lunch. She ate in the company commissary alone reading, and what she read was everything. She downloaded every quarterly report, every internal memo, every market projection for the last 10 years. She learned the company's infrastructure, its finances, and its legal vulnerabilities. She sat in the back of my board meetings, never speaking, her hands folded on her lap, just watching with those unervingly steady eyes. Her silence was louder than any of my other VPs' obsequious blustering. I found myself seeking her out. "What do you think of the new solar proposal, Linda?" I'd ask, ignoring my COO, who had just spent 10 minutes praising it. The entire boardroom would freeze. She would look up from her notepad. "It's inefficient," she'd say, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the silence. "You're routing 30% of your R&D into a legacy system because it's a safe bet. It's lazy. You're trying to put a new coat of paint on a gas-guzzling engine and call it a hybrid." A gasp. No one spoke to me like that. "And what would you suggest?" I'd press, fascinated. "I'd suggest," she'd say, "that you stop trying to own the sun. The future isn't in sucking the earth dry, but in harnessing what it gives for free. Elias, my husband, he always said the real revolution wasn't in the hardware, but in the storage. His patent would have made every home its own power plant." Her words stung. They were a direct, calculated indictment of my business model. And they were also brilliant. They were right. I started confiding in her. It began as a test, but quickly morphed into a need. She was the only person in my orbit who wasn't a sycophant. I told her about the pressures of the company. I told her about my consuming decade-long rivalry with Gavin Russo, the head of Russo Dynamics. "He's a scavenger," I ranted one late night, staring out my penthouse window at the city lights. I'd summon her to my home office under the guise of reviewing reports. Linda stood by the fireplace, holding a tablet. "He's not a scavenger, Mr. Sterling. He's a parasite. A scavenger waits for things to die. A parasite needs its host to be alive." I turned, a slow smile spreading on my face. "Exactly. That's exactly what he is." I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone. Not my lawyers, not Ben, certainly not Isabel. I told her about my father, Arthur Sterling, the brilliant, ruthless founder of a company, now a ghost rattling around a high-end care facility in upstate New York. He doesn't even know who I am anymore. I admitted the confession, tasting strange on my tongue. I go to see him, and he just looks through me. The man who built all this. He's gone. Linda looked at the fire. "He's not gone," she said simply. "The person is still there, even if the memories aren't. He's just locked inside." I stared at her, a strange, raw feeling in my chest. You're the only person I can actually talk to." She just looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You should get some rest, Mr. Sterling. You have a big day tomorrow." Meanwhile, Isabel was not fading into the background. She was on a public warpath. Her humiliation at the wedding, compounded by the swift divorce and the news, splashed all over the gossip columns. That I'd installed the help in a corner office had curdled into a specific, toxic rage. She was the queen, exiled, while the chambermaid was being treated as a confidant. Her lawyers were fighting me for every asset. But I knew Isabel. Money wasn't the point. It was revenge. Then the leaks began. It started small. A tip-off to a regulator about an impending acquisition in South America. The deal stalled, costing us $500 million in projected revenue. "It's Rousseau," I snarled, slamming my fist on my desk. "I know it's him. He must have a source inside the SEC." But the next one was worse. Much worse. Project Chimera. It was my baby, my legacy, a revolutionary quantum computing project we'd been developing in a deep-level subbasement for 5 years. It was the one thing that would make Sterling Innovations untouchable for the next century. A detailed R&D schematic, the very core of the project, appeared on a tech blog. It was gutted, analyzed, and dismissed as overhyped and fundamentally flawed. Our stock wobbled. $2 billion in R&D, vaporized overnight. I was apoplectic. There is a mole. I roared at Ben, my voice echoing in the cavernous office. Someone is feeding information directly to the press, and I know it's Russo. Find out who. Ben, unflappable as ever, stood his ground. We're running diagnostics on all servers, sir. But the leak, it wasn't digital. Our internal sweeps show no breach. What are you talking about? It came from inside, Ben said, his voice grim. A physical copy. Or at least photos of a physical copy. My blood ran cold. I had printed exactly one hard copy of the Chimera schematic. I kept it in the private, biometric safe in my office. The only people with access, besides me, were Ben and... No, the thought was a wisp of smoke, and I stamped it out. Impossible. I wouldn't even consider it. My suspicion fell instantly and entirely on one person. It's Russo, I snarled. He must have bought someone on my staff. The cleaning crew. An executive assistant. Find them. I want you to tail Russo. I want you to track his finances. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he uses. Find the connection. Ben set his team loose. For a week, they dug. And for a week, they found nothing. Russo's financials were clean. He was, for all intents and purposes, innocent. He's clean, sir, Ben reported, frustrated. But there is one thing. He's been making regular, quiet visits to a specific bar in the financial district. The Vesper. Always at 10 p.m. on Thursdays. Always meets the same person. We can't get a good look at who it is. The booth is too dark, and their security is tight. Then get a better look. I ordered. My paranoia was at an all-time high. I was a king on a paranoid throne, walking the halls of my company, seeing traitors in every shadow. My COOs, my board, my lawyers, they were all suspects. I was surrounded by people, yet utterly, completely alone. I'd built an empire of glass, but all I could see were distorted reflections of my enemies. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What's the point of building a fortress if you just end up a prisoner inside it? The only person I felt I could turn to, the only one who seemed above the fray, was Linda. I don't know who to trust. I confessed to her, pouring a whiskey in my study, the liquid amber catching the 3 a.m. light of the city. Trust is a luxury, Mr. Sterling, she said, organizing my files. Sometimes you just have to trust that your enemies will reveal themselves. Her words sparked an idea. A classic trap. That's it, I said. We'll feed them misinformation. I'm scheduled to fly to Tokyo for the emergency meeting about the Chimera leak. I'll make it very public. But I'm not going. Sir, I'm going to let the mole think the house is empty. I'll leave a false Chimera 2.0 file on my desk. Whoever tries to access it will have them. This was a brilliant plan. It was my plan. I was back in control. I made the arrangements. I announced my 48-hour trip to my staff. I told Isabel's lawyers. I told Linda. I'll be out of touch, I said to her. Hold down the fort. Of course, Mr. Sterling, she said, her face impassive. I left my penthouse, got in my limo, and had Ben drive me to the airport. We sat on the tarmac in my private jet for an hour, lights on, engines roaring. Then we got off, got back in the limo, and drove back to Manhattan. Drop me a block away, I told Ben. Wait for my signal. I'm going in through the service entrance. I want to catch this bastard in the act. It was 9:45 p.m. on a Thursday, Russo's meeting night. I entered my penthouse. The apartment was dark, silent. I moved down the marble hallway, my heart pounding with a predator's anticipation. I was going to destroy whoever this was. As I neared my study, I heard voices. Soft, conspiratorial. My blood turned to ice. They were in my home. I expected to find a sniveling VP or maybe a member of the cleaning staff handing a file to one of Russo's lackeys. I was prepared for that. I was prepared to be angry. I was not prepared for what I saw. I pushed the door open. Isabel was there, yes, pouring a brandy. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen. But she wasn't alone. Sitting in my chair, his feet on my antique Napoleonic desk, was Gavin Russo, and standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, silhouetted against the glittering New York skyline, was Linda Cole. She was the one talking. She was the one in command. The final wire transfers from the Cayman account will clear by Monday morning, Linda said, her back to me, her voice cold and precise. Once the funds are secured, Gavin, your team will trigger the coordinated short sell. That, combined with the Chimera leak, will drop the stock 40%. It'll be a bloodbath. And you're sure he'll sign? Russo asked, swirling my brandy. He's a fool, Isabel spat, her voice thick with venom. He'll be so panicked by the stock drop, he'll sign anything I put in front of him, including the new proxy forms for his father's shares. He'll think he's just signing a new divorce settlement. Linda nodded. Once we have the proxy for Arthur's controlling stake, we call an emergency meeting. We vote Liam out, install Gavin as interim CEO, and liquidate the R&D assets. The company will be a hollow shell in 6 months. He'll be ruined. I must have made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, a gurgle of pure, unadulterated shock. All three of them froze. Gavin Russo scrambled to get his feet off my desk, knocking over a priceless statue. Isabel dropped the brandy decanter, which shattered on the marble floor. Linda, she didn't flinch. She didn't gasp. She just turned, slowly. Her face, illuminated by the city lights, was not one of shock or fear or guilt. It was cold, hard, and absolutely, terrifyingly triumphant. You're early, Mr. Sterling, she said. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it physically knocked the wind out of me. I leaned against the doorframe, my legs suddenly weak again. The ant had only attacked my body. This was an attack on my soul. Linda, I whispered, the name tasting like ash. You. Me, she said, stepping into the light. Did you really think I'd be happy as your VP of philanthropy? Did you really think $10 million or a fancy title would make me forget what you did to Elias? This is just money, I stammered, gesturing at Russo. This isn't justice. This is theft. It's a start, she said. I took your wife. She gestured to Isabel, who was now weeping a pathetic, cowardly sound. She was pathetically easy to turn. She hates you, Liam. Truly hates you. I took your rival, she gestured to Russo, who looked like he was about to be sick. He just wants your chair. He'll be easy to dispose of later. And now, I'm taking your company. Get out. I snarled, a primal rage finally surging past the shock. My voice was a low roar. Get out, all of you. Russo and Isabel scrambled for the door, pushing past me like rats. But Linda walked. She moved slowly, deliberately, stopping right in front of me. She was so close I could smell her perfume, the same subtle jasmine scent that had filled my office for 3 months, a scent I had come to associate with safety. This isn't the end, Liam, she whispered, her voice a venom far more potent than any ant's. This is just the beginning. I'm not just taking your company. I'm taking your name. I'm taking your legacy. She reached up and brushed a piece of imaginary lint from the shoulder of my jacket, a gesture so intimate it felt like a slap. I told you I wanted to see how you sleep at night, she said, her eyes black and bottomless. Soon you won't. And then she was gone, leaving me alone in the ruins of my study, with the shattered glass, the stench of spilled brandy, and the overwhelming, suffocating silence of total betrayal. The 2 days that followed were a blur of cold-blooded, crystalline fury. The moment the door clicked shut on Linda, the shock evaporated and the ice formed. I did not rage. I did not break things. I went to war. I was alone in the ruins of my study, the shattered brandy decanter, a glittering, sticky mess on the floor. I stepped over it, my shoes crunching on glass, and sat at my desk, The chair was still warm from Gavin Russo. I punched the intercom. Ben, get in here. Now. My security head was through the door in less than 10 seconds, his eyes taking in the scene, the glass, my face. They were here, I said, my voice a flat, dead thing. All three of them. Cole, Russo, and my wife. It's a full-blown conspiracy. They're liquidating me. Ben's face hardened. What are your orders? Lock them out, I commanded, my fingers already flying across my private terminal. I want Linda Cole's credentials revoked. All of them. Building access, server access, her corporate accounts. Blacklist her name from every system we own. I want her to be a ghost. I dialed my chief legal counsel. David, wake up. It's Liam. I'm invoking the moral turpitude clause in my prenup. I have evidence of conspiracy to defraud. I want Isabel's assets frozen by 5 a.m. All of them. The cards, the accounts, the properties, everything. I want her to wake up and find she can't even buy a cup of coffee. I hit another line. My head of IT, Mark, someone, and I mean someone, is about to trigger a massive short sell on our stock, backed by leaks I now know were internal. I want you to initiate a Grey Knight protocol. I want fail-safes on every algorithm. I want to know the second a sell order over 100 shares hits any exchange. We're under attack. For 48 hours, I did not sleep. I was the shark I had always been, wounded and bleeding, but now twice as lethal. I stalked the halls of my company, a specter fueled by coffee and adrenaline, barking orders. I tried to undo the damage. I called in favors. I strong-armed board members. I mortgaged my personal assets to create a multi-billion-dollar buyback fund, ready to absorb the hit. I was patching the hull of a battleship, not realizing the torpedoes were already in the water. On Monday morning, I stood in the center of the Sterling Innovations trading floor, an arena I owned. The digital tickers on the wall were a placid, pre-market green. My staff, my traders, all looked at me with a nervous, electric energy. They knew something was wrong. Hold the line, I said, my voice carrying over the quiet hum. We're expecting a raid. Don't panic. Buy everything. At 9:30 a.m., the opening bell rang. It wasn't a raid. It was an apocalypse. The tickers didn't just turn red. They bled. The Grey Knight protocol I'd ordered was a joke. Linda hadn't just used one channel. She had coordinated a dozen. Hedge funds, dark pools, foreign exchanges, they all hit at the same instant. The Chimera leak, which they had timed perfectly with this, had spooked the institutional investors. The stock, the most stable blue-chip tech stock on the Nasdaq, fell 42% in 10 minutes. The phones rang. It wasn't a sound. It was a scream. A single, unending shriek of panic. My traders were yelling, their faces pale, bathed in the red glow of their terminals. Sir, it's a cascade. The algorithms are triggering stop losses. I've got a margin call from Petrova. She's dumping everything. We've lost 7 billion. Sir, we've lost 10 billion. I stood there, motionless in the eye of the hurricane, watching my life's work, my father's work, being eviscerated in seconds. The buyback fund I'd set up? It was a teacup in a tsunami. It was gone in 90 seconds. I was losing. No, I had already lost. Sir, Ben said, his voice quiet at my elbow, cutting through the din. He was holding a tablet. The financial damage, it's catastrophic. But it's not the real problem. What is the real problem, Ben? I snapped, not looking away from the terminal, where my net worth was dissolving like sugar in acid. The shares. Your father's shares. I froze. Of course. The company's structure was old. My father, Arthur Sterling, still held the controlling 51% stake. My shares were locked in a trust. I was the CEO, the public face, the king, but he was the power. I held his voting proxy. It was the one weapon I had left. He can't vote, I said, my voice hollow. He has dementia. I have his medical proxy. His shares vote with me. I can still fight this. I can call an emergency meeting. And what happens, Ben asked, his voice low and terrible, if your father passes? Now, in the middle of this crisis? My blood turned to ice. I turned slowly to look at him. His 51%, it goes into probate. The estate. A slow, dawning horror crept over me. It would be frozen. For months. Years, maybe. I couldn't use his shares. I couldn't use his proxy. I wouldn't have a controlling interest. You wouldn't have a company, Ben corrected. Your own stake isn't enough to fight a no-confidence vote from the rest of the board. And Gavin Russo has been buying up the panic sells all morning. He'll have 20% by noon. I stared at him. They're not just trying to oust me. They're trying to paralyze me, to take my biggest gun off the board. They wouldn't. I whispered, but I knew they would. I knew she would. The woman who had looked at me with such cold, bottomless hate. The woman who had said, I'm taking your legacy. As this realization, this new, deeper, more personal terror, settled over me, my private line rang. Not my office phone, which was one of 100 screaming, but my personal cell, the encrypted line. I looked at the screen. The caller ID was Willow Creek Care. I snatched the phone, my hand shaking. This is Sterling. Mr. Sterling, thank God. The voice was a frantic whisper. It was Maria, the nurse who had cared for my father for 20 years. A woman I trusted more than my own family. Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry to call, but a new doctor is here. A new doctor? I didn't authorize a new doctor. I said, already moving, shoving my way through the frantic traders, heading for the elevator. I know, sir, I know. He says he was sent by Mrs. Sterling. By your wife, Isabel. The blood drained from my face. She has no authority. Maria, you know that. Call security. I did. But he has papers, sir. Official-looking papers. He says he's a specialist, a Dr. Evans. He's here to administer a new vitamin cocktail for your father's heart. No, I breathe. Maria, get him out of there. My father's medication is stable. It cannot be changed. Do you hear me? I tried. Maria's voice broke and I heard a sob. I tried, Mr. Sterling. I told him that. And he became forceful. He pushed me out of the room. Oh God, Mr. Sterling, he locked the door. He's in there with him. I was in the elevator, jamming the lobby button. Ben, to the car. Now, Willow Creek. Go, go, go. I burst out of the lobby and into the armored SUV Ben had waiting, the engine already roaring. Go, I told the driver. Now, break every law. I don't care. The SUV lurched into traffic, horn blaring. I was still on the phone with Maria. Maria, listen to me. Call facility security. Tell them to break down that door. Tell them it's a medical emergency. An assault. I am, she wept. They're coming from a main building. They're not moving fast enough. He's in there with him, Mr. Sterling. I'm so sorry. I'm pounding on the door, but he won't answer. I'm 5 minutes out, Maria. I said, my voice a strained, terrible calm. Just keep pounding. The drive was a red and gray blur. We wove through traffic, the specialized engine roaring, the horn a constant, desperate blare. My mind was empty of everything but a single primal command. Get there. I wasn't thinking about the company. I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about a frail old man with milky eyes who didn't even know my name. We screeched to a halt in front of the opulent, quiet facility. The wheels were still spinning as I threw open the door. I didn't wait for Ben or the rest of my team. Mr. Sterling, you can't run in. The receptionist began, rising from her desk. I vaulted the desk. I landed on the plush carpet and sprinted, my Italian leather shoes slipping on the polished marble. I flew down the quiet, beige hallway, past the tasteful art and the smell of lavender. My father's suite was at the end of the wing. The door was closed. Maria was outside, just as she said, pounding on the solid oak with both fists, her face a mask of tears and terror. He's not answering, she cried. Ben. I yelled, not even looking back. Ben, a former SAS operative, was right behind me. He didn't need to be told twice. He leveled a powerful, brutal kick just beside the handle. The wood splintered. He kicked again. The lock shattered, and the door flew open, slamming against the inside wall. The scene was quiet. Horrifyingly, sickeningly quiet. My father, Arthur, was in his bed, looking small and frail against the white pillows, his chest rising and falling gently. Standing over him was a man in a white coat I'd never seen before. He was lean, with nervous eyes. He was holding a syringe, its needle poised just above the foreport in my father's arm. He looked up, his eyes widening in pure shock as four of us, me, Ben, and two of my men, filled the doorway. Time stopped. It was the wedding all over again. The sting. The collapse. The doctor's thumb, in a last, desperate act of completion, pressed the plunger. No. I screamed. It wasn't a tackle. It was a launch. I crossed the room in 2 bounds, a primal roar tearing from my chest. I crashed into the fake doctor, my shoulder connecting with his chest. We slammed into the heavy medical cart, sending vials, charts, and metal trays scattering across the floor with a deafening crash. The man was strong, wiry. He shoved me back, his eyes wild. The syringe was still in his hand, now empty. "You're too late," he spat and bolted for the open door. "Get him." I screamed at Ben. Ben and his team were already on it. They met the man in the doorway, a swift, brutal, and efficient takedown. I heard the man hit the floor hard. I didn't watch. I stumbled, gasping, to my father's bed. "Dad." I grabbed his frail shoulder. "Dad, wake up." His eyes fluttered. He looked at me, his gaze milky and unfocused. "Elias," he mumbled, his voice a faint whisper. Is it time?" "No, Dad, it's Liam." "It's Liam," I said, my voice breaking. Maria rushed in, her hand over her mouth. "What was it? What did he give him?" I looked at the floor. The line was clear, but the liquid from the syringe was already in his system. The poison was in. "Call 911. I yelled at Maria. "Tell them it's a massive, unknown overdose. Possible potassium chloride. A beta blocker. Tell them to send a crash cart. Move." I turned back to my father. His breathing was already becoming shallow, his eyelids fluttering. The man who had built an empire, the man I had both hated and idolized, the man who held the last key to my survival, was dying. And it was my fault. I had brought Linda into our lives. I had brought this evil. "No," I whispered, grabbing his frail, papery hand. It was cold. "You're not dying. I won't let you. You hear me? I won't let her win." I stared at his face, helpless as the wail of new sirens. A sound that now seemed to be the soundtrack to my life grew closer. The doctor was subdued. Ben had him, but the damage was done. The poison was in. The second, and perhaps final, climax of Linda's revenge was underway. The trial was a media crucifixion. I say that as a man who has crucified entire companies, I invented the art of the hostile takeover, the bloodless boardroom execution. But this was different. This was a spectacle. The Manhattan Criminal Courthouse had been transformed into a coliseum of polished mahogany and marble, and we were the main event. The press had dubbed it the Billionaire betrayal. The public, who had once envied me, now despised me. And the 3 people on trial? They were a perfect, tabloid-ready cast of characters. We sat in that suffocating, overheated room for weeks, breathing the stale air of recrimination. At the defendant's table, they were a study in disintegration. Gavin Russo, my rival, looked like a caged animal. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face a pasty, sweating mask of indignation. His lawyers were constantly whispering to him, and he'd just shake his head, his eyes fixed on me, full of pure, unadulterated hate. Beside him, Isabel was a porcelain doll cracking in real time. She wept. She wept constantly, a delicate, designer-clad victim. Her lawyers had painted her as a scorned woman, emotionally abused, a fragile creature who had been manipulated. It was a masterful performance, and it was utter bullshit. And then there was Linda. Linda Cole was a statue. While Isabel and Gavin fidgeted and whispered, she sat perfectly, terrifyingly still. Her hands were folded on the table. She wore the same simple black dress every day, her hair pulled back in the same severe bun. She wasn't a defendant. She was an observer. She watched the jury. She watched the judge. And most of all, she watched me. The prosecution, led by a sharp, merciless DA named Helen Rostova, laid out the case with brutal precision. First came the financial crimes. The Cayman account numbers, the short sell orders, the testimony from my IT team about the Chimera leak. It was a mountain of digital evidence, all pointing to a conspiracy between the three of them. Then, Rostova moved to the main event, the charge that had captivated the city, attempted murder in the first degree. The prosecution calls Dr. Alan Finch to the stand. The weaselly, fake doctor who I'd tackled was brought in, wearing an ill-fitting suit and a look of profound terror. He had, of course, flipped for a reduced sentence. Dr. Finch, Rostova began, "Could you please identify the people who hired you for your services?" Finch's shaking finger pointed first at Gavin Russo. His associates, they paid me $100,000. They said it was for private concierge care for an elderly patient. "And who," Rostova continued, "gave you your specific instructions?" Finch's finger moved, slowly, until it was aimed directly at Linda. Her, the woman, Ms. Cole. She met me. She gave me the syringe. She told me what to use. A massive dose of a beta blocker. Metoprolol. She said it would look like he just faded away. She said, "A man his age, with his condition, no one will question a simple heart failure." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Linda just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Next came Maria, my father's nurse. She wept on the stand, her testimony a heartbreaking, frantic story of a locked door and a premonition of pure evil. "I knew it was wrong," she sobbed. He just looked through me. He pushed me out. I knew he was going to hurt him. Then it was my turn. The walk from my seat to the witness box felt like a mile. The flashbulbs were a strobing, blinding assault. I swore the oath. "Mr. Sterling," Rostova said, her voice dripping with a calculated false sympathy, "please tell the jury in your own words what happened on the morning of October 12th. I recounted everything. My voice was a flat, dead monotone. I recounted the market collapse. I recounted the phone call from Maria. I recounted the drive, the wailing sirens, the sprint down the hallway. And what did you see when you broke down the door, Mr. Sterling?" I saw him," I said, pointing at Finch. "He was standing over my father's bed. He was holding a syringe. He was pressing the plunger. And what did you do?" "I tackled him," I said. I tried to stop him." "And your father? What is his condition today?" I swallowed, the first genuine emotion choking me. He's in a coma. The doctors, they don't know if he'll wake up. The poison did its work. I stopped it from finishing. I looked across the room. Gavin and Isabel were staring at the table. Linda was watching me. Then the defense began. It was a predictable, cowardly spectacle. Gavin's lawyer argued his client was a victim of corporate espionage, not attempted murder. "Gavin Russo is a shark, ladies and gentlemen," he boomed. "He'll take your company, sure. But he's not a killer. He was played. He admits to the financial plot, but he had no idea about Ms. Cole's unhinged personal vendetta. He thought they were just paralyzing the company's shares, not its founder." Then came Isabel's defense. She took the stand herself, a vision in pale, virginal white. I was so lonely," she wept into a tissue. "Liam, he was cold, distant. And then this woman," she gestured to Linda, she befriended me. She preyed on my vulnerability. She told me this was a way to get his attention, to get my power back. I thought we were just moving money. I would never hurt Arthur. He was like a father to me. It was a brilliant, disgusting performance. They were both doing the same thing, cutting their anchors and throwing Linda to the sharks. They were painting her as the lone sociopath, the mastermind who had duped them all. Finally, Linda's public defender, a tired-looking man with sloping shoulders, stood up. His strategy was the only one he had, a plea for sympathy. He called me back to the stand for cross-examination. "Mr. Sterling," he began, his voice soft, "let's go back. Not to the hospital. Not to the wedding. Let's go back 8 years. Isn't it true that Sterling Innovations, under your direct leadership, engaged in a systematic campaign to destroy a small startup called Greencore? Objection, my lawyer shouted. Relevance. It speaks directly to motive, your honor, the defender shot back. It speaks to the state of mind of my client. The judge sighed. I'll allow it. But be brief, counselor. The defender turned back to me. Mr. Sterling, you destroyed Elias Cole, did you not? You took his patent, his company, his home. You drove him to his death, didn't you? I stared at Linda. She was waiting. This was it, the real trial. Not about the money or the poison. It was about this. My acquisition of Greencore. I said, the well-rehearsed corporate lie tasting like poison on my tongue was deemed legal and binding by the courts. Liar. The shout came from Linda. It was so loud, so sudden, so full of raw, condensed fury that a bailiff actually drew his weapon. She was on her feet, her hands slammed flat on the defense table. The mask was gone. Her face was a contortion of pure, unfiltered 8-year-old rage. Liar, she screamed again, her voice echoing in the stone-walled room. You are a liar. You sat in your glass tower and signed the papers that murdered my husband. You killed him. You killed him as surely as if you put a gun to his head. Order. The judge bellowed, banging his gavel. Order in the court. Miss Cole, you will be silent, or I will have you removed. 2 bailiffs moved toward her. Her lawyer frantically tried to calm her down, his hands fluttering at her shoulder. Sit down, Linda, please, this isn't helping. Linda pushed him away. Not a shove, but a stiff-armed, deliberate dismissal. She took a deep, ragged breath, her chest heaving. She smoothed her simple black dress. She looked at the judge, her eyes burning with a terrifying, righteous fire. Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I'm done with this. I'm done with the lies. She turned to her lawyer. I want to testify. Her lawyer's face went white. Linda, no. That is not our strategy. We do not. I don't care about your strategy, she said. She pointed at me, gets to sit there and lie? After everything he did? No. She looked at the judge. I will take the stand. The judge stared at her, then at her floundering attorney. Ms. Cole, you have every right to testify, but I strongly advise you to listen to your counsel. I am testifying, she said. It was not a request. The courtroom was a tomb. The air crackled with anticipation. This was the moment. Very well, the judge said, the defense calls Linda Cole to the stand. Linda stood, adjusted her dress, and walked past me. She didn't look at me. She walked to the witness box, her step steady, and placed her hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Her dark eyes met mine. I do. She sat down. Her lawyer, looking like a man walking to his own execution, shuffled his papers. Ms. Cole, could you please explain to the jury what was going through your mind when you accepted the job from Mr. Sterling? Linda ignored him. She turned her body slightly, addressing the jury, but her words were aimed at only one person. Me. I did it, she said, her voice as clear as a bell in the silent room. I did all of it, but you've all got the story wrong. The prosecution. My partners. Him. Rostova, the DA, leaned forward. Isabel gasped a small, choke sound. The wedding, Linda continued, her voice hypnotic. That wasn't an accident. The gallery erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Quiet. Let her speak. My husband, Elias, she said, her voice softening for just a moment. He wasn't just an engineer. He was a scientist, an amateur entomologist. He loved insects. He was studying them. Specifically, Paraponera clavata, the bullet ant. He was fascinated by its venom, its properties. He kept specimens in a secure, temperature-controlled habitat in his lab. After he died, after I lost everything, I kept his research. I kept them. A cold dread, deeper than anything I'd felt before, settled in my stomach. When I lost my house, I had to move into a small apartment. I had to take any job I could get. I ended up on the roster for a high-end catering company. And when I saw the assignment, the wedding of Liam Sterling, I knew it was fate. I knew it was my chance. She took a breath. I brought one of the specimens. I put it in a small vial. I planted it on the altar, right where I knew he would stand to kiss his bride. I know what you're thinking, that I meant to kill him. She shook her head, a small, sad smile on her lips. No, not then. The venom. Elias's research showed that in a single controlled sting, it rarely kills. But it does paralyze. It causes unimaginable world-ending pain. My plan was for it to sting him once. I wanted him to collapse, to be humiliated, helpless, in front of all his powerful friends. I wanted him to be a joke. I wanted him to watch me walk away as he lay there, in his own filth. Her eyes hardened, but the ant, it was too aggressive. It didn't just sting. It crawled into his hair. It was disoriented. It delivered a full, lethal sting, a fatal sting. And as I watched him fall, as I watched him convulse, I saw him dying. She leaned forward, gripping the rail of the witness box. And I had a revelation. A dead man can't suffer. A dead man can't feel pain. A dead man can't watch his life's work turn to ash. A dead man can't feel what my Elias felt for 6 long months before he drove his car off that bridge. She choked on the word, mastering herself in an instant. So, yes, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. I saved him. I pushed through that crowd. I grabbed those clippers. I dug my fingernails into his scalp, and I saved his miserable life. Because I needed him alive. The room was absolutely, terrifyingly still. The jury was frozen. I needed him to be healthy. I needed him to be strong. I needed him to watch me seduce his vapid, pathetic wife. I needed him to watch me partner with his most hated rival. I needed him to watch me dismantle, piece by piece, the entire bloody, corrupt empire he built on my husband's grave. She finally looked at me, and I saw the full, terrible, biblical scope of her pain. The only thing I regret, she spat, is that the nurse called him. His father should have died. It would have been poetic. The father who built the company and the son who destroyed it, gone in the same week. That would have been justice. She sat back, her confession hanging in the air like a pall of smoke. Isabel was sobbing openly. Gavin Russo looked green. My own heart was a cold, dead stone in my chest. She was right. About all of it. The pain, the motive, the hate. She was right. The jury was out for 45 minutes. It was a formality. Guilty on all counts. Gavin Russo, Isabel Sterling, and Linda Cole. Conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. The courtroom was a pandemonium of camera clicks and shouted questions. But I didn't hear any of it. I just watched as they cuffed her. She was calm again. The statue had returned. Her war was over. As the judge began to speak about sentencing, I knew with a sudden, chilling certainty that my trial, the real one, had only just begun. The word guilty echoed in the courtroom, followed by 2 more. Guilty, guilty. The room exploded. Camera shutters clicked like a hailstorm. Journalists were shouting, their voices a chaotic babble. Isabel collapsed into her lawyer's arms, a single theatrical wail of despair. Gavin Russo slumped in his chair as if his spine had been removed, his face a sickly, grayish white. Linda just closed her eyes. For a single, fleeting second, the tension drained from her. The fight was over. Her war was done. Bailiffs moved in, cuffing Isabel and Gavin, who were both now weeping incoherent. They moved to Linda, who stood placidly and put her hands behind her back. The steel clicked shut. Her face was impassive again, her mask of cold control firmly back in place. This court will come to order, the judge bellowed, his gavel hammering against the wood. Order. I will have this gallery cleared. The noise subsided to a dull roar. My lawyers were patting me on the back, their faces triumphant. We got them, Liam, my lead counsel, whispered, giddy with the victory. Attempted murder. They'll get 25 to life. It's over. It's over. The words felt wrong. Hollow. I looked at Linda, standing in handcuffs, a woman who had lost everything twice. once to my greed, and now again to her own hate. I watched her, and I saw the truth of her confession. She hadn't lied, not about a single thing. The judge was preparing to move to sentencing. Given the overwhelming evidence and the disturbing nature of the testimony, this court sees no reason to delay. Your Honor. My voice cut through the room. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. Everyone froze. The gallery went silent. My lawyers turned, their smiles vanishing. Liam, what are you doing? Sit down. My counsel hissed, grabbing my arm. I shook him off. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, his face a mask of judicial annoyance. Please sit. This is not the time for a victim impact statement. That will come at the sentencing hearing. Your Honor, I said, walking past the bar, approaching the center of the court. May I speak? Mr. Sterling, this is highly irregular. Please, I said, before you sentence them. The judge stared at me, his gaze weighing the sheer insanity of the request against the fact that I was the victim, the man whose life and family had been targeted. He sighed, a deep, frustrated sound. You have 1 minute, Mr. Sterling. Make it count. I turned. I didn't look at the judge. I didn't look at the jury, who were staring at me, rapt. I didn't look at Isabel or Gavin. I looked at Linda. She was watching me, her head held high, her eyes cold. She expected, I'm sure, one final gloating speech. One last, I won from the man who always wins. She's right, I said. The courtroom, which had just started to buzz, fell into a silence so profound I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. My lawyers both said my name, a strangled panic sound. She's right, I repeated, my voice stronger. About the beginning. About Elias Cole. Liam, shut up, my lawyer lunged, but a bailiff put a hand on his chest. I lied on the stand. I continued, the confession ripping out of me. When her defender asked me, I said my acquisition of Green Corps was legal. It was, but it was also evil. I didn't just win a dispute. I murdered his company. We buried him. We filed dozens of frivolous, bad faith lawsuits. We bled him dry on purpose. I gave the order. I told them, drown him in paperwork. We blacklisted him from the industry. I am responsible for his death. This was what he did shocked everyone. Not the money, not the rescue. The truth. Linda's mask, the one that had held through the sting, the betrayal, the trial, it finally broke. Her eyes widened. Her mouth fell open slightly. This was the one thing she hadn't planned for. This was the one variable her brilliant, broken mind hadn't accounted for. My surrender. D.A. Rostova was on her feet, her face a mask of pure, predatory shock. Your Honor, is the court hearing a formal confession to perjury and corporate fraud? Yes, I said, turning to her. Yes, you are. I, Liam Sterling, did knowingly and with malicious intent conspire to defraud Elias Cole and the shareholders of Green Corps. I committed perjury in my earlier depositions regarding the acquisition. It's all true. Everything she said about my ruthlessness, it was all true. The judge was speechless, his face purple. Mr. Sterling, do you have any idea what you're saying? I do, I said, and for the first time in my entire adult life, I felt the crushing weight of my empire lift from my shoulders. I felt light. I know exactly what I'm saying. The judge stared at me, then at the defendants, then at the DA. He banged his gavel, a sharp, final crack. This court is in recess, he bellowed. But it was too late. The truth was out. The sentencing, when it finally happened, was almost an anticlimax. Isabel and Gavin, weeping and pleading, were given 20 years. Linda, silent and still, was given 25 to life. As they led her away, her eyes met mine one last time. There was no hate, no triumph, just a vast, empty, and terrifying confusion. She had won her war, but I had just rewritten the terms of her victory. Then the judge turned to me. Mr. Sterling, given your confession in open court under oath, I have no choice but to have you detained. You will be indicted by a grand jury. Two bailiffs approached me. I turned, put my hands behind my back, and felt the cold, familiar click of the handcuffs. 18 months later, I walked out of the Allenwood low-security federal correctional institution. I had pled guilty to everything: perjury, fraud, market manipulation. They had thrown the book at me, and I had accepted it. I served 18 months of a 5-year sentence. I was no longer a billionaire. I was just Liam. I walked out wearing a simple suit I'd ordered online. There was no limo, no Ben, no jet, just a gray, overcast Pennsylvania sky. Sterling Innovations was gone. I had ordered its dissolution for myself. The assets, the buildings, the patents, the art, the cars, all $40 billion of it. I had liquidated everything. My father, Arthur, had not woken up. He had passed away peacefully in his coma 3 months into my sentence. I was not allowed to attend the funeral. My final act as CEO was to create a single, irrevocable trust. My first stop was not a penthouse. It was a university campus. It was new, a gleaming glass and steel structure that seemed to drink the sunlight. The sign over the door was carved in simple, elegant granite, the Elias Cole Center for Green Energy. I stood there, just another man on the sidewalk, watching students come and go. I had put the entire $40 billion into this. Half was for Linda's son, Elijah, placed in a blind trust he could access at 18. The other half, $20 billion, was to create this center, to fund, develop, and most importantly, make every single one of Elias Cole's stolen patents open source. His legacy, the one I had tried to bury, was now free to the world. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The lobby was bright, full of schematics and models of his designs. A young boy, maybe 11 or 12 now, was sitting at a table sketching in a notebook. He had a focus, an intensity in his eyes that I recognized. He had his mother's eyes. Elijah Cole. I sat down not at his table, but one nearby. He looked up a little wary. "Hi," I said. My voice was quiet. "Hi," he said, turning back to his sketch. It looked like a new kind of battery. I'm Liam," I said. "I'm a new volunteer here." He looked up again, this time with more interest. "A volunteer? Are you an engineer?" I looked around the lobby at the legacy of the man I had destroyed. "No," I said, a small, sad, and honest smile touching my lips for the first time in years. "But I'm learning." Linda had saved my life, so I could suffer. That was her plan. She wanted me to live, to watch her tear down my world. She had succeeded, but in doing so, she had done the one thing neither of us had ever expected. She'd given me a reason to build something new. She saved my life, yes, but in the end, her hate and the terrible, beautiful, clarifying truth it revealed had been the only thing strong enough to save my soul. I lost my empire, but I had finally found what Elias Cole had known all along. I found a purpose. I picked up a brochure and began to read. Thank you for listening all the way. Your support means everything. Subscribe, leave a comment with your real name and where you're from, and you might see your shout out in the next story. See you tomorrow, same time, same good energy.